Okay, welcome back to Let's Play Train Simulator 2015. In this video what we're going to do is we're going to do the Munich to Augsburg route, wash and go. And I'm recording this post-commentary because I thought I was recording my audio, but apparently it didn't record, my microphone wasn't on, so this is my take at a post-commentary, so we'll see how it goes. We're going to be doing this route because I want to show off all of the systems, including the LZB, which is used in this route. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there of the wash and go route, and I know the middle-aged gamer has a very good route, but he doesn't use any of the PZB, LZB, SifA systems, which is systems that everyday German train engineers will use when doing these routes. And it's fully immersive experience if you understand how to use these routes. My previous video went over everything except the LZB, so good to watch that one first. And it's also definitely a good idea to check out PTG Rail's German signaling tutorial video. I'll post a link in the description below, as is standard. His video goes in very deep level of detail how to use all of these systems and all the buttons and controls and everything for them. So we're starting out here right outside of the Munich station, pointing towards Munich, but we're going to get going right away here to save as much time as possible. We're going to activate SifA and PZB right off the bat. One thing about this route is that it does kind of start off really slow, literally and figuratively. We need to go very slowly as we proceed in here. So we're activating all our systems, including the FB system, which is basically cruise control. Set a specific speed using the Y and C keys, Y to increase, C to decrease in 10 km/h increments. And so for right now we're going to hold at 40 km/h as we follow a preset path into the washing tube right outside of Munich. And as we approach the washing tube, we will be able to speed, we will have to slow down to 10 km/h as we go through it. All the systems appear to be working as expected. We did get the as-is standard restrictive condition once you start moving on the PZB system, and essentially what that system is a check to make sure that you understand the system, and as a way to control the speed of trains right away. In order to be allowed to go more than 45 km/h, you have to release the train from the control of the restrictive system by pressing the end key on the keyboard, which is the PZB release key. The other system, of course, is SifA, which is essentially a dead man switch slash driver awareness reminder, which makes sure that the driver is still in control of the train by requiring an input every 20 to 40 seconds. And pressing that button is required when the light lights up on the main cab. It's a white light, which you can see right now lights up. And if you don't press it in 4 seconds, you get an audible alert, which will sound 3 times. You'll hear it a couple times in this video. If you don't press it by the 3rd time, you hear the voice tell you to that emergency brakes will be applied. Coming down this downhill through this underpass here, there was a small issue that happened when I was attempting to use AFB to slow down to 40 km/h, which is what the signal is aspect instructing. Green over yellow with no other indication is always going to be a 40 km/h speed limit. But what happened is I was using AFB alone and not manual input to instruct the train to slow down, and this actually caused overbrake and caused the G meter to go beyond what the game says is considered comfortable, and I got what's called a driver quality point deduction of -18, which you can see in the lower left corner. So approaching the wash now right in front of us, we have to slow down to 10 kilometers per hour throughout this entire duration of this wash, which is what makes this scenario right up front here one of the more boring, tedious, ongoing sections. You see the 1 sign here right on the right is the indication that we need to slow to 10, but as you can see that the programming in the game actually sets that a few meters before the sign, and I got bit with a small speeding warning of about 10 points, so I lost even more points there, what I otherwise could have not lost. And as you also see, since we did pass below 10 kilometers per hour, the PZB system will automatically enter restrictive mode again. Again, restrictive mode is when you see the 70 and 85 lights flashing back and forth. Now you can hear this clicking noise. I'm inputting small little control adjustments in the speed to stay as close to 10 as possible. I'm actually allowed to go up to 11.0 without hitting 11.1, and that still won't be speeding. So I kind of push it here to get through this as quickly as possible. But this is just a graphic little, tunnel, which is supposed to have, water shooting everywhere and brushes and everything, but obviously there's not enough graphical capability in a train simulator to do that. But this is essentially what would happen to a train every once in a while to make sure that it's clean of dirt and stuff, so it's able to be as efficient as possible getting up to speed, which we're going to hit a maximum speed of 280 kilometers per hour on this route. We'll demonstrate the LZB system, standard on most German high-speed trains. That was the SifA alert. 1 out of the 3 you're allowed to hear before the emergency brakes come on. I believe, I may have mentioned this before, but if you do catch the SifA in the process of emergency braking, you are able to cancel or override the emergency brakes by bringing the throttle back to 0, making the brakes go to 0, and then setting the reverser to 100%. You should be able to retain control without making the train have to come to a complete stop. If you commit a signal violation or a speed PZB violation and the emergency brakes come on as a result, you must wait until the train comes to a complete stop before you're able to start it up again, just as in most other automatic deployments of emergency brakes on any other route where that happens. You must come to a complete stop before taking any action. So here's a nice little view of the outskirts of Munich, central square, and me almost missing a SifA alert. I also don't see right away as we pull out of the wash, the speed limit does go up to a higher value here, but I don't catch it right away because there's no other indication other than in the F3 dash HUD at the bottom of the screen that tells you when that increase occurs. So there it is up to 40, and I don't see it yet. So even though I'm putting in small train inputs, I didn't see it until right now when I realized I set the AFB to 40. And in this case, I'm only holding about a 50% acceleration because I'm going to have to slow down right away anyway as we approach the Munich main station, track 18. So a limit of 40 is in effect. We have a clear shunting signal proceeding. Traffic control system has placed our train on a route that will get us to track 18 as we shunt our way into the station. this point I set the speed down to 30, as there's a 30 km/h limit as you pull into the station. As I pull into the station, I set throttle to 0, reverser to 0, coast in the rest of the way, and turn off the PZB and SifA systems, as I will be exiting the cab at this point once the train comes to a stop. Check my clearance to the bumper, and I hit the T key to open the doors and allow passengers to exit, and then at which point I then press Control plus to move to the other end of the cab. Once I'm in the other end of the cab and waiting for passengers to board, I reactivate the SifA system and the PZB systems. Now remember, the SifA system is active when the light goes off, and the PZB system is activated when the 85 light turns on, 85 indicating a passenger train versus freight. The freight train, depending on the mass of the cars, will have a different speed system under the PZB rules. The passenger trains are the most lenient and allow for the highest speed when first approaching a signal indicating something other than clear, where you only have to slow down to 85 km/h, whereas heavier trains have to slow down to 70 or 55 respectively of their designation. Again, all this is gone over in detail in the PTG Rails tutorial video. Here everything will be to the 85 rule, or Obere, as in Germany, which means top or highest speed rules. We won't really encounter any red signals on this route, but we will encounter one good example of a reduction in speed requirement as we round some corners heading up to Passing Station. Once we have picked up our passengers at Passing Station, however, we will begin getting out of here at much higher speed and demonstrate the LZB system. Once again, we are able to get rolling. We set an AFB speed of 30 km/h as we exit the station to make sure we remain compliant with speed, and we notice that PZB, as is standard, enters restrictive mode. However, since our speed limit is currently 30, we don't have to worry about dismissing PZB at this time. However, as is standard, we will always have to acknowledge SifA alerts as they come up. The signal we have just passed on the right is indicating a shunting clear, as is any other dwarf shunting signal would indicate, so there is no reason to stop or change speed at this point. The signal itself may carry a speed restriction of 30 km/h, but I do not know for sure. But right now, the best thing to do is abide by the track rules and continue at 30 km/h until otherwise indicated. At this point, it is actually indicating we can speed up to 40, however, I don't notice it right away once again, as I am ensuring we are clear for signals as we exit Munich Station. As we pull onto this track, I increase the AFB to 40 and allow the train to accelerate. Notice when we're using AFB, as I mentioned in previous videos, and as you'll see in the tutorial video, the train actually doesn't hold exactly the speed you set. It holds about 3.5 to 4 kph below the speed you set, and this is a safety buffer to ensure that if the train were on, an example, a downhill section, there would be enough time for the system to react and apply a running brake so that the speed that you set would not be exceeded. Unfortunately, when it comes to more challenging scenarios that are built in the German routes, doing this will actually cause you to still be late for those arrival times on a scheduled basis and end up losing points from the perfect 1000. So getting a perfect 1000 or not getting a perfect 1000 on German routes where you're using PZB and AFB to control your speed should not discourage you, because it is in some cases impossible to obtain this. This being a perfect example of that occurrence. So we're now on the main line of the track, and we are waiting for a permission to accelerate to 60, which has just happened, and at this point we will be reaching much higher speeds and can go full forward on the throttle. Passing a 12 sign, which indicates 120 km/h speed limit, and the way the German signs show that is they just show the first, two, or the tens place. You have to put the last zero on yourself. You know, they save, I guess it saves money on sign size or something, or they don't confuse it with like a yard or a mileage sign or a kilometer sign. Distant markers. That's just the German standard. If you see a big block gray sign with a black number in the middle of it, that's the speed indicated in tens of kilometers per hour. When you set the AFB to 120 and allow us to accelerate, we are now at speed. But we won't be able to be here for very long because there are some speed control measures in effect again as we make the approach to passing station. As seen on the HUD below, there is a 90 kph limit, which we will need to abide by. However, there is no warning on the track that this is approaching. The means of keeping the best time possible, I wait until very close to the signal before reducing the IFB to 90 in time. Following the 9 sign on the right, you will see that we have a distance signal of green over yellow. This is indicative of a speed reduction requirement to the signage indicated, if otherwise indicated, which in this case is a yellow 6 triangle below the signal, meaning we need to slow down to 60, but we don't need to slow down to 60 right away. Again, that 60 only applies when you reach the next signal. What you do need to do, however, under the rules of PZB, is slow down to 85 or less. You need to slow down to 85 or less within 23 seconds of hitting any signal which is not clear. And this is a safety mechanism to make sure that you remain compliant with all signals. Another thing you must do when you pass a signal other than clear is hold down the page down key as you pass over the signal. You are allowed to react to it, press it after, pass the signal like you would in a UK route, but the real German rules say you need to press the signal button before you hit the signal and as you pass over it. So at this point I will continue slowing down to 60 so that we are there before we hit the signal, which is right over our head now. And there we are. Another thing that I'm pointing out in this video is that if you are not in the process of accelerating, there is never a need to release yourself from PZB. I was doing a lot of releasing from PZB yesterday to demonstrate that you're allowed to do it, but really you shouldn't release from PZB unless you need to. The system will automatically dismiss those kind of restrictions like it did below. I never pressed end, and you can see that we are completely free of any restriction right now other than the line speed, which is known to be in effect. So as we shunt over to the left here and exit and enter passing station, we will move the throttle to 0 and allow ourselves to coast into the station. At this point I could have set reverser to 0 as well. Begin to apply some brakes manually and slow down for a passenger pickup. Set the reverser to 0. I like to get underneath that awning to our left, but it's not necessary. Press T to open passenger doors, so it's a complete stop. So now when we exit the station, you'll actually see we're fully on this set of track now. We're not on a shunting track anymore, so this track's maximum line speed is at 100 kilometers per hour. And we can, as we depart the station, set 100 in the IFB, which I have just done. Passengers are all aboard. We can set 100% reverser and get going. However, I forget to release the brakes just this one time, so brakes are released and we can begin to accelerate. I keep it at 50 for a few kilometers per hour until we're definitely in motion, and then I set full 100%. Now in this case, as we accelerate, we do need to remember to hit the end key to PZB release, which I do right here. And this allows us to accelerate up and beyond 45 kilometers per hour as we reach 100. We could let it sit and dismiss, but there really isn't a reason to do that. There is no rule that says you must wait for it to dismiss. It's just you must dismiss it before accelerating past that speed. It's an acknowledgement of your understanding of the system being in effect. So as you can see, we've already reached 100 kilometers an hour. The train has very good acceleration. And we have a 200 kilometer per hour limit approaching as we enter the high-speed portion of this route. Once we get above 160 kilometers per hour, we will enter a portion of the track controlled by the LZB system. You know you are in that portion when you hear a horn alert and the letter U will light up on the right side of the dashboard. You will also see a cable running down the middle of the two metal portions of the track, and usually a small sign on either the left or right side that says LZB. LZB is a significantly different animal than PZB, but it is much, much, much simpler to manage. As you can see, we have now entered the LZB system. The only course of action required to be taken at this point, aside from the constant SifA acknowledgements which continue throughout, is to set the AFB full forward in order to allow all speed changes to take effect. If you do not set the AFB all forward, you will be limited to the amount of speed currently set in the AFB. But you won't know that unless you can see that the speed is not increasing from the limit you set it at. So setting it full forward will have the computer control system take over what the correct speed is. In this case, right now, the speed is actually only 80 kilometers per hour, and we are slowing down to meet that requirement. You can tell the train is taking action to slow down when you see a red letter G lit up on the lower half of the dashboard. As the speed comes down, the G will disappear once you have reached a compliant speed, and the train will continue at that speed until another speed is required. Again, the speeds that are put into this program and the train is running at are all pre-programmed by a set of control engineers who build the LZB track and based on conditions of the line. Like in this case, we actually need to shunt over to the right-hand speed line because we have an incoming high-speed train that is waiting for us to clear. We're just passing it on the left, so the LZB system automatically input a requirement to shunt over to the right at 80 kilometers per hour without any user input required. Very, very cool system. Awesome once you get to know how to do it. Very cool watching your train drive by itself. Another thing that the LZB system gives you is in the center of the console I'm pointing at right now. This is the distance marker, and it shows you how long it is until the next distance the next speed change, just for your information. It doesn't require any actional input or anything like that. It's just a FYI sort of thing. What it should do, and it would be really cool if it did, is it tells you, when you switch back from LZB to PZB, which does happen, and it will happen in this video, it should show you that distance, but it really doesn't. You kind of just have to be ready for the switch off of LZB to back to PZB and then control the train again. There is one indication that does light up on the dashboard that does show that the LZB is ending. We will see that when it happens, but the distance marker is not how long until that point. There isn't really a way to know that until you just have to look outside and see that the LZB ends. by looking at the signage, and the rail in the middle of the track will disappear. So we are now accelerating up to 200 kilometers per hour. Again, as I said before, SifA still remains in effect. You have to acknowledge it to make sure that you're still paying attention, but everything else is automatically controlled by the train as long as you have FB and throttle set full forward. You'll get the maximum performance. That was a lot of information, but that's probably the best way to explain it without getting too crazy. Again, a really good idea is watch PTG Rails tutorial video. Nice little view there of the train going by. Most of the rest of this route is just, going to wait until we are coming out the other end of this. There isn't really much more to explain about how the LZB system works, other than the indication we'll get near the end, which I will point out when it happens. At this point, I tried to get a view of the German countryside, but there isn't much you can see out the left and right windows. But pretty cool as everything goes by in a blur as we accelerate up to the top speed of the route. 280 kilometers per hour is set. And that horn was indicating that the 9,900-meter countdown has just activated, telling you the next speed restriction is in effect. There's some cool views of the train showing by at 250. Trying to get a nice side view here. This is an earlier route, made in 2013 or so, and you can tell that the way they model the tracking is kind of like there's always these very subtle, sudden shifts in the pitch of the hill on the track, the incline, and you see a train kind of react in a sudden manner. The people who've made routes have really improved upon this in more recent routes. See right there, you have that little jerk. The jerks are a lot less, they're a lot more subtle on more recent routes. Like if you have the Chinese Chengdu to Suning route, it's very subtle, even though that route does change height somewhat. It's very subtle that the route is changing height at all. So we did reach 273 kilometers per hour before the 200 speed limit has kicked in. And as you can see, even though this says that there's well over 2 kilometers to go, almost 3 kilometers to go until the 200 speed is in effect. The slowdown happened even before we saw the 200 limit appear on the dash at the bottom of the screen, HUD display, which wouldn't even be in the train to begin with. So the system is reacting well before the speed is even in effect, which is the whole beauty behind the LZB system. It is very responsive to knowing what condition is coming up on the route, and programming the speed of the train to react to those changes well ahead of time for maximum comfort of the passengers and complying with everything. So that's why LZB is so awesome, because it kind of handles everything for you. So this 200 kilometer per hour requirement is just because of this very shallow right turn that we're on right now, and it looks like a shallow right turn, but at the same time, because of how fast we're going, it needs to slow down to 200 for passenger comfort. And now we're back up to 280. It actually is entirely possible to drive LZB manually. Just turn off your AFB and control the speed as required. Then you can rely on the center portion FYI display to know how soon ahead of time you need to start worrying about slowing down. I believe also you'll get the U indication on the dashboard, like shown right here, or the G indication, I'm sorry, which will tell you that you need to start slowing down. Accelerating to 240. us past the 280. On the track, we're getting an indication that we're required to slow down to 100 in 4.8 kilometers. So the PZB system, LZB system, is accelerating us up to 280 until the system deems that it needs to start slowing down from the 100 zone in 4 kilometers. Again, this speed limit is just because of this left turn here, which again looks shallow, but it's steep enough to require a pretty decent slowdown. 100. We are also getting close to Augsburg, so we need to start slowing down and be ready to pull into the station in the scenario. See, we did end up being late, so it's timeless penalty. You get a full 200 points. This is just because you aren't driving at the full maximum speed. There's that 4 kph buffer put in there for safety. Again, so if you want maximum points on your scenarios, you kind of just need to not use PZB, LZB to make that happen. But then it takes away from the realism of the route. Limit. This train on the left is also approaching the same limit, which is why it's not operating at the same speed. And that horn indicated, as you can see on the dashboard, the yellow light is lit up. This light says end on it, END, and this means that the LZB system is going to end within the next couple of kilometers. So to prepare for this, what you need to do is you need to play around with the AFB control until you have it set to the speed that you're either currently going or are required to slow down to. And in this case, I kind of find it right around 100 and make sure it gets there. And then as you get close to the 80, again, LZB is still in effect until you're not on it anymore. So you can set the IFB down to 80 or down to 100 and it will maintain that spot. So it's best place to put it is 80. So once you see that you're doing that, and at this point I need to set it to 80. I don't have it set at the right value. So I set it to 80 and allow ourselves to slow down because we are now back on PZB system again and required to abide by all signals. So as we start slowing down and entering the station, I set 60 on the AFB just to set a more reasonable speed as we pull in. And as we get closer, I cut the throttle to 0 to allow the train to coast in the rest of the way, and also we'll set the reverser to 0 and rely on manual braking to bring the train to a stop. PZB and SifA are off, and as we get below 5 kilometers per hour, we'll reduce the brake to below 30% to allow the train to come to a nice, smooth stop. Let the passengers out, and that will conclude the wash and go scenario on the Munich to Augsburg route. Hope you enjoyed watching. Feel free to leave comments, suggestions for improvement, that sort of thing. This is probably more or less the kind of scenario I'll demonstrate. I'll play each one at least once. I actually just got the Epic Journeys new scenario pack, which has a German route on it. So I hope to demonstrate those soon. As you can see, I did manage to get 937 points in the scenario, which is pretty awesome. So not much short, still get the gold star, and that's really all you really need to worry about. So at this point, thank you for watching, and I hope to catch you again soon.